We're going to get into my risers and fallers for July of 2025. So we'll do one more of these as we lead up directly into draft season when I update my rankings, maybe in 3 weeks or so. From the last time I updated my rankings in June until July, a lot of players have moved significantly in my rankings. So I'm going to talk about them here. Also, if you're new here, if you could hit a like, hit that subscribe button. All right, so kicking it off with the quarterback position, I got 4 guys I want to talk about, 3 risers and only 1 faller. So unfortunately, I have to talk about Trevor Lawrence as a riser here. I had him buried down at 28, and I think that was a little bit unreasonable, right? I do like pretty much all of his weapons, right? I think Brenton Strange is a nice value, and obviously Brian Thomas Jr. alongside Travis Hunter, I think are going to be great. So I did move him up into that back end QB2, early QB3, maybe if in 10-team leagues, but I do think that there's at least some reason to believe if he's going to stay healthy all year, that he can kind of elevate the offense a little bit, right? So I guess I'm going to back down on that a little bit. I would still take Tua over him, so I don't anticipate getting him anywhere, even with this ranking, but I wanted to make my rank of him maybe a little bit more competitive to where I think he's actually going to finish. The next guy is Justin Fields. He did just get hurt, so I did create this before that news, but I still think I have him appropriately ranked even with that injury. Hopefully he's fine for the start of the season with that ankle injury, but I did move him up from 17 to 13. And, a lot of that has to do with the job security that you feel as you get closer to the year, right? I had him at 17. Before he signed, I had him down at 30, so it's like kind of up in the air, kind of don't know what the situation is going to be. But now as we get closer, we're getting more and more confident that he's going to be the starter, especially if he's looking good in camp. The rushing upside is just too much to ignore, right? So he's going to be relevant even in 1 quarterback leagues would be my guess. So he's another one that could continue to rise, but in your 2 quarterback leagues, he is a little bit risky because he presents that injury risk. And, the bottom is so much lower in terms of replacement value in 2 quarterback leagues. So he is somebody that makes me a little bit weary. And there aren't very many rankers that are going to have like Jared Goff over him, for example, but that's something that I'm going to be doing for sure. I'm going to have Goff ahead of Fields pretty much the whole process. And you'll see Goff as low as 20 in some people's rankings because in 1 quarterback leagues, Goff is just the boring vet that doesn't run and can't really get you a top 3 finish. But, he did get you a top 7 finish last year. And in 2 quarterback leagues, that's incredibly valuable. The last riser here at quarterbacks is Kyler Murray, and I have him from 15 to 11. I'm definitely softening more on Murray as well. I just keep thinking there's no way he can continue to be this poor at throwing the ball down the field. So he just was like the worst at it last year. And he's got Marvin Harrison Jr., who's bulked up, so theoretically better on contested catches, better over the middle. And so hopefully he steps into a more predominant role in the offense. McBride is obviously one of the best safety blankets in the league. And James Conner is still going to be doing his thing in the passing game as well. So I really do think that there's opportunity here for Kyler to move up. And another major component of why I moved him up specifically is he talked about wanting to run significantly more this year. And if that does come to fruition where play breaks down, first read isn't there, and he just takes off running instead of maybe, dumping it off to McBride 16 times, maybe he takes off 3 of those times or 4 of those times. And to me, Murray's biggest asset is his ability to score long touchdowns on the ground. I was kind of harping on that last year where it felt like the only time he ever had good weeks was when he scored long touchdowns. And he did it like 7 times. And it was just like, dude, like Kyler's throwing the ball so poorly, but he scored a 40-yard touchdown. So it doesn't even matter. He's going to look good fantasy point wise, pretty much no matter what on those weeks. So I do think Kyler is a solid back end quarterback 1. And the rushing upside just is, is too much to ignore in terms of pushing him below an entire tier of quarterbacks. The one faller I have to highlight here is Jordan Love. I didn't love doing this one, no pun intended, but, I had him up at 11 and I really wanted to keep him there. I really was feeling pretty confident with that ranking, but I just decided to drop him almost an entire tier, and it was behind, I had Kyler at 15, so I did kind of move him behind where I did have Kyler, but I have him behind like Justin Herbert and Drake May and Caleb Williams, those types. So I'm just a little worried still that, the rushing isn't going to come back. And if they do continue to lean into Jacobs, Love isn't going to be that good of a quarterback asset. Now, if it does change and he goes back to his volume and he goes back to, the Matt LaFleur offense, can produce an efficient quarterback, especially in terms of touchdowns. If it does go back to that, I'm going to wish I left him at 11, but for now, I'm souring a little bit on Jordan Love. Going down to the running back position, Christian McCaffrey, I feel like that was inevitable as soon as we see him in camp, see him moving around well, see him running routes. So I moved him from 9 to 6. I still don't think I'm going to get him at running back 6, but I did move him ahead of Ashton Genty. And then Chase Brown, I moved from 13 to 9. I was just way too low on him. I still just was kind of resisting my NFL draft rank of him because I just thought for sure they were going to address the position in the draft. And then when they didn't until the very end, I'm thinking, okay, Brown is going to be, the only game in town, and he's going to be a workhorse, and the OC is hyping him. And it's like, he's going to starting to say things like he's going to become a household name. It's hard to ignore that kind of hype from your coaching staff. They really want him to be a focal point. So I do have a lot of confidence in him as a top 10 running back. Kyren Williams, I also pushed up from 14 to 11. Most rankers, I feel like, will have him going the other way, but I just can't quit Kyren. The volume is just so critical in fantasy football, and he is going to get the volume. 2 straight years of just enormous volume, and I don't think that changes. The offense is still good. He's still going to be scoring touchdowns. He has the most touchdowns of anybody over the last 3 seasons, and so, it's just really hard to see that changing in any significant way. He's so safe, and I feel like I can genuinely build my RB strategy around him as a hero running back that's available in the 4th round of your 10-team Superflex league. So that type of player is somebody I'm going to value a lot. And the last guy in the top tier of running backs, so top echelon of running backs, is Kenneth Walker. And I did only move him from 18 to 16, but that was up a tier. And the big name I moved him ahead of was Mixon. I really do think that Walker presents quite a bit of upside here. He was on an unbelievable pace last year. He had those 3 games where he caught a ton of passes. So maybe it's not quite that many. Like, he had an 8 and a 6 reception game. So I don't think we can count on that too much, but I do think there's a situation where he can settle into a more stable role in the passing offense here. In a situation where they might need it, right? Cooper Kupp hasn't exactly been super healthy, and behind Jackson Smith and Jigba, it's really just like Elijah Arroyo now. So Walker could be heavily involved in their plans in the passing game, and that will only push his upside higher. If it really does come to fruition where he's going to get 50 targets, I should definitely have him ranked above this. Guys that I have rising that are lower in the rankings here, right? So I have Isiah Pacheco, who I moved from 39 to 30. I'm still not touching him. I don't have a lot of interest in him, but I did feel obligated to move him up just because he is likely to start as the lead running back on Kansas City, and so pushing him into the top 30 I felt like was almost obligatory, because even if he has 8 games where it's like that, he could still sneak his way into the top 30 but not be very valuable at the end of the year. I do still think Rashard Smith is the running back that I want on the Chiefs, and that's not going to change just because Pacheco is having a good camp, which he's not even really having a good camp. So I just felt obligated to move him up, and he might show up in fallers in the next video. Javonte Williams, another guy that I feel like has started to look pretty good in camp, but showing a little bit more burst of his pre-injury self. And so it's another one of those things where I'm feeling much more confident now than I was a month ago that he's going to be the starter this year, and pending any sort of injury or anything, he should remain the starter. And, when you can get one of those guys at the back end of the top 30, I think that's probably worth it. So I did move him up 5 spots. And then Austin Ekeler, I moved from 52 to 41. He is going to show up in one of those in my next video as well, where we're teeing up guys that I just end up looking for at the end of drafts. And he just seems to be one of them. He was a lot better than people remember last year for some reason, right? When Brian Robinson was out especially. But I do think there's a pretty significant role for him in the passing game here, and he can also carve out still on the ground and be productive. So the offense is really good. They should be scoring quite a bit. And, any opportunities he gets, I still think he's got some juice left in the tank. So in the last round of my leagues, I don't have a problem taking a shot on him. If it's a lot more Brian Robinson than we're expecting, and Ekeler kind of is left behind in the offense, you're using a last round pick on him. So you can move on pretty easily. And then the other guy that I moved up, and this is obviously related to the Quinshon Judkins news, but Dylan Sampson, I moved from 54 to 38, and I'm going to keep him aggressively ranked until we get news that Judkins has signed his deal. So if you're playing in any best ball leagues right now, and Sampson's still buried down in like round 16 or 17, you need to make sure you're drafting a lot of him right now, or as much as you can if you haven't been getting exposure to him, because there's a chance that he just gets to lead backfield, and to start camp, he's going to be getting first team reps. So, if they hadn't drafted Judkins, I would be so high on Dylan Sampson right now too. So obviously we do expect Judkins to sign. Whether or not there's any sort of legal implication or suspension coming, we don't know at this time. But Sampson is somebody that I do like as a player, so I'm pretty excited that there is potential here for him to get an opportunity early in his career. Moving over to the fallers now. So we've got James Cook, who I moved from 8 to 13. So I think I just had him a little too aggressively ranked. I do still really like James Cook. He's another guy that I feel very confident in as a hero running back build. I just can't get over that he did it as an efficient player with passing game work, and then he did it on low touches but highly efficient with a lot of touchdowns. It just feels like if he's out there, it's going to be productive, right? And like last year, he didn't get a ton of volume because he missed a game, and they were just winning big so many times that other guys were getting involved. If it's close, I still think James Cook is going to be out there on the field. And, Buffalo, we said this last year with Baltimore, right? Like the chances that they're just in these weird game script games or in these blowout games isn't that high. That, there generally is a lot more difficulty in the NFL. So, going back to closer games and getting back to James Cook being out there all the time, I think is a safe bet. Alvin Kamara, somebody else that I had aggressively ranked, so I wanted to highlight that I moved him down 2 spots. And I got Kyren ahead of him, and I got Chase Brown ahead of him. So that, I think, was more of a correction that I needed to make. But I did just want to highlight that I do have him knocked down a little bit now too. And I have Kamara at 14, I have Hampton at 15, and I have Walker at 16. So that's something too where I considered moving Walker ahead of Kamara as well, up to 14. But I didn't want to move Walker ahead of Hampton. So maybe there's a video there to break down those 3 players for me in particular, just because I feel pretty good about all of them, especially if I'm in on them as my number 2. But if I can get one of them as my number 1 in the 6th round of a Superflex league, or even the 5th round maybe of a Superflex league, that's pretty good value in my opinion, and still why I would like to wait at running back, honestly, because I do really like all 3 of those players. Okay, Harvey, I moved down from 21 to 24. I'm standing a little bit stronger than most people I've seen on him, despite the J.K. Dobbins signing. And I do expect J.K. Dobbins to be the starter in week 1, right? So the first running back to take a snap, I would be shocked if it's not Dobbins. But I don't know that means I would rather have Dobbins. He still has an extensive injury history. Despite his kind of comeback season last year, he did still miss 4 games. And Harvey's still the 2nd round pick. Harvey is still the guy that Peyton wanted to go get. So even if this is a little bit of Mark Ingram to Alvin Kamara style in terms of breakdown in the backfield, I think Harvey is still the one that we're going to want. I still think that there's an opportunity for a 3rd pass catcher in this offense. And if that's Harvey, I think there's going to be a very big boom from him in terms of fantasy production. So I do want to keep him in there as like a back end 2 in 12-team leagues, or kind of like a mid-tier 3 in 10-team leagues. So he's, again, if he gets pushed down, he's somebody that I'm going to be targeting quite a bit in my drafts. Quinshon Judkins, I dropped from 25 to 29. I feel like that was like a must with the news, right? He's still not signed. For those of you that don't know, he had a domestic violence incident. And so, there's just a lot of uncertainty around him right now. And so I'm pretty much avoiding him. In Dynasty, I don't have a problem going in on him, but in redraft, until we get some clarity, it's just really hard to pick somebody like that. So, if we don't get clarity by the next rankings update, you can definitely expect him to fall in my rankings. And the last guy here is another rookie, right? So I kind of hammered on these rookies that I had ranked pretty aggressively initially, but Jaden Blue, I'm not buying the lazy report that came out about him. I think that was kind of just a one-off. It's been refuted by multiple other sources. So that's not why I dropped him. I dropped him because I'm not sure if he's going to be able to usurp Williams on the depth chart. And I was kind of hoping when they broke camp that they would be splitting reps, or that we would be seeing him in third down packages, or anything where he's taking first team reps. And I haven't heard anything about that yet. So if that isn't going to be the case, I just can't really justify taking him over some of these other guys that I feel good about, veterans that have proven roles that I feel like can stay on the field or stay on my roster, right? I talk about how valuable the roster spots are. I want guys on my team that are worth rostering. I don't want guys that have such big floors that like week 2 drops are the floors. I try and avoid guys like that, despite potential huge upside like Blue has. Like if I draft him and then he's immediately the guy I'm going to be looking to cut for the week 1 waiver wire, the week 2 waiver wire guy, I am trying to avoid that situation on my rosters, right? I want to try and get in front of those guys whenever possible, and so that's a big part of the reason why I dropped him. All right, going down to wide receivers. The first guy, most important guy in this whole ranking, I think, is Tyreek Hill. So I had him down at 18. I was honestly looking to kind of bury him more in June, but after kind of reevaluating and not feeling excellent about anybody right after that tier of 9, 10, and 11, I decided to push Tyreek up into that 12 spot. And doing that is going to make sure that I get him in quite a few places now. I don't have a problem taking him in round 4 of your Superflex 10-team leagues. And, he's going to be there pretty much every single time. So it does feel a little bit to me like he's coming off a down year, kind of like when he changed teams to Miami, and then he was going in the 3rd round because we just didn't think he was going to produce at the same level with a different quarterback. And then it was like, oh wait, he's still Tyreek Hill. So Tua obviously struggled with the injury. They changed the offense when he came back. It was much more short area, quick hitting. They moved on from Jonnu Smith, so they're not going to lean on Darren Waller in that way. I wouldn't expect. I don't think Waller's going to be capable of taking on as much work as Jonnu did, especially in the red zone. And so I just think that there's an opportunity here for Hill to kind of go back to how he was before, right? And if that's even possible, if that's even in the range of outcomes, this is like going to be the steal of the draft. So I'm pushing up to 12. I'm going to be heavily targeting him, especially as my second wide receiver if I can get him. And so that's why I have pushed him up here. He's the only one in the top tier of receivers that I moved up. So that's why I spent the most time on him. The middle tier of wide receivers here, I got 3 guys, 2 guys actually, really. I moved Jameson Williams from 32 to 25. He finished last year as wide receiver 19. And I know he scored on some long touchdowns, but I think there might be an opportunity to get targets even more concentrated in him if, Isaac Tesla is going to be the 3rd wide receiver. He's a rookie. He's new. If he's going to be the one out there, I just don't know that he's going to be drawing a ton of targets. So if that sort of outside work is more channeled into Jameson Williams, I think that he could be in for a huge year this year as well. And, you could do a lot worse as a boom bust wide receiver 3. The other guy I just had misranked, Jacoby Meyers. I don't know why I had him at 41. I don't. Moved him up to 29, corrected it, got him in the top 30. And again, he's a starter in all three wide receiver leagues. Really like Jacoby this year. Wide receiver 1 on his team, better quarterback play, was wide receiver 15 in the last 8 weeks of the season last year. Even with all of Brock Bowers' volume and even with everything he was doing, Jacoby is just perennially undervalued and is somebody that you should absolutely be targeting on every single one of your teams. Calvin Ridley, I moved him from 45 to 37, and when I've talked about him in the past, in the last couple of videos, if you haven't heard, go back and listen, but I'll reiterate here on Ridley. He definitely has the feel to me of like a Terry McLaurin from last year, where I was saying about McLaurin, I just don't see a path to him breaking the top 30. And then it was like, oh, the path was that Jane Daniels was way better than I expected, and he catches 13 touchdowns. Like, that's the way he gets there, right? So Ridley led the NFL in air yards last year, right? And he had over 50% of the Titans' air yards. And now you get Cam Ward, who loves to throw the ball downfield and is a downfield passer. coming in. And so it's like, well, wait a second, hold on. Are we going to be getting another situation where, he steps in with an excellent veteran receiver? Ward is better than I think. And then Ridley is somebody where I'm like, dude, it was right there. Ward was the first overall pick. Like, of course he was going to be better. So I moved him up to 37. I might rank him even higher as I get closer to the year. Again, somebody else that I'm kind of targeting, trying not to miss it, even though I'm not the hugest fan, because I do feel burned from last year. I had him in my top 25 last year and just didn't play out at all. The quarterback play was so bad. So, I'm not quite that aggressive yet on Ridley, but it's definitely somebody that I kind of flag as I start to see his name on the draft. All right, and then these last three guys are kind of further down. I know Pickens is ranked right next to Ridley now, but it was 48 to 38 for Pickens. I've seen him a lot higher than this, up in the mid to late 20s. I still am pretty far behind consensus, I feel like, and I still don't feel like I'm going to get him, but I did have to move him up because I do love Dallas's offense. I do love Dak. But I feel like Pickens is going to be a roller coaster ride. There's going to be weeks where he goes off because Dak hits him for a long one. And then there's going to be weeks where he's got 6 targets and 2 catches for 15 yards. So that's not somebody I'm entirely interested in drafting. I'm more interested in trying to buy that player in a trade after he has 2 stinkers in a row. And if that's something you do in season, that's why it's hard for me to rank him as like a starting player. It's like, well, I feel like I'll be able to acquire him cheap during the season, and I'm looking towards the playoffs anyways. And he's not somebody I'm looking to rely on early in the year. So all of those things kind of come together, and it's like, if it works out for me to get him, great. If not, I'm kind of okay without getting him, and maybe it'll cost me in week 15. I'm playing against him the first week of the playoffs and he goes off on the team I'm playing across from, but the chances of that I feel like are not that good, and I just don't feel like I'm going to be missing out much if I don't have Pickens on my team. Egbuka, somebody I moved up from 52 to 44, and he's somebody that I'm a lot more interested in drafting, right? And I have Godwin, you see over on the other side, where I moved him down from 20 to 32. I haven't quite had them switch spots yet, but the fact that Godwin isn't practicing is a huge reason why I'm moving up Egbuka, right? He was a first-round pick for a reason. They're definitely going to use him. You would expect Godwin and Evans to be still the main focal points, and Egbuka to be getting caught up to speed and be the third option in the offense, and maybe not always getting all the targets. But if Godwin is going to be continuing to struggle with this injury further and further into camp, I'm going to probably switch these two in the rankings entirely, right? And I'm going to be looking to draft Egbuka in round 7 or round 8 even. He's an excellent player. He's the all-time leading receiver at Ohio State, despite always kind of being the number 2 there. But he's a consummate pro. Like, they're already talking glowingly about him in camp. The wide receiver room is, Baker is. And so, a guy like that, where he's a rookie, he's got a lot of talent, and he's just in a situation where he might get buried, and he's getting buried in the rankings for it. Those are the type of guys that could possibly just pop if they do get the opportunity. Like, you look at last year's Bucs team when Godwin went out for the year, and even Evans missed time early in the season. Like, if that's something that's going to happen, if Godwin misses time early in the year and anything happens to Evans at any point during the season, once Godwin's back, like, we're looking at a league winner that's getting drafted outside of the top 9 rounds right now. So this is somebody that I'm trying to handle delicately, because I don't want to hype myself up too much on him, because if they do stay healthy and they are out there, he's probably not going to be that fantasy relevant. That would be my guess. Now, like I said, there's a path to both, so it just makes him a very volatile asset, despite how good of an actual NFL wide receiver he is. All right, these last 2 guys I had to move up as well. I got them inside the top 50. Coleman. I'm drinking the Kool-Aid a little bit here on Coleman. I feel like he's getting hyped up quite a bit, and that he is looking to take over as the number 1 option in the offense. And they went and drafted him last year, right? They traded back. They knew they were going to be able to get him, and they picked him early 2nd round. And so I just think that if there's any chance that he develops his game outside of the boundary receiver that he was last year, and has any sort of improvement in his route tree, any sort of target uptick, that when you play with Josh Allen, that can turn into fantasy points really quickly. So, great offense. If he's the number 1, it's going to be really exciting to see. And he has the upside to be one of the players that's like, dude, this was this was not hard to see coming. He had the runway right in front of him. We should have been drafting him at least a touch more aggressively. So I'm going to keep my eye on him in terms of ADP because I really want to stay. I would really want my ranking to stay ahead of ADP on him so that I feel comfortable taking him around 11 or 12. And then lastly, Darnell Mooney. He's been getting a lot more hype as we realize that Atlanta's offense is really concentrated into these four players. Bijan on the ground with obviously his receptions, and then Kyle Pitts at tight end and Mooney and London at wide receiver. We know it's going to be those four, and Pitts might continue to get some hype here, but I don't think any of us are really all that interested there or believing it. So, I think Mooney is a good asset to get, and I feel like he's more than adequate as a bye week fill-in, and he fits that bill that I was talking about earlier with Ekeler about having a player that you're not going to feel like you want to drop, right? He's a veteran, he's got a solid role, and if he comes out in week one and has two targets, it's like, well, okay, bad first week, right? And he goes out and has 6 or 7 targets in week 2. It's like, okay, here we go. I feel good about keeping him, moving forward, and it's another one of those guys that you can value and help you save fab early in the year, right? You get Likely coming up, and it's like, well, do I really want to spend $20 to get Likely and cut Mooney? Probably not. I'm good with Mooney. Like maybe I could spend $1 on Likely, right? Somebody else will blow their fab on him, right? But you have guys that you're confident in, and I feel like Mooney is one of those guys, so I'm definitely looking for him late in all of my drafts. Moving over to the fallers, I only have 4 here. So obviously I'm much more optimistic on some of these guys at the running back and wide receiver position than I was, necessarily having any sort of big fallers. But I have the 2 Kansas City Chiefs guys as fallers. Rashee Rice is 100% due to the impending suspension that I expect to be coming down here shortly. If it comes out that he's only suspended 2 games or that he doesn't get suspended, I can't imagine either of those. I would expect 4 games, maybe 3, but probably 4. But if it's 2 or less, I'll probably move him back up to 13. I'll just move him back behind Tyreek Hill. And if no suspension, I'll move him ahead of Tyreek Hill. I'll move him to 12. So the reports in camp are that he looks healthy and that he's getting targeted heavily and that he looks right. So in terms of injury, maybe a little bit of hesitation, but I think that's why we're ranking him at 12 because of that hesitation. If he didn't have those injury concerns of coming back from a knee injury, he'd be probably in the top 5 wide receivers. We'd be talking about him with Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr. So, I think that's already baked into that 12 price, the injury, and I expect it to be wheels up pending the suspension. So I dropped him down expecting 4 games. That's where that ranking is. Xavier Worthy, I think I just cooled off a bit. I think I was a little excited. I was very pumped on how he was a good target earner last year. But I do think the offense is going to be set up way different than it was at the end of last year. And so I do expect him to work on the boundary, and he'll get some end arounds and some rushing game work. And, maybe Mahomes is super efficient. Maybe he does really well down the field and is just great, right? And in that case, I'm going to wish I left him up higher or even pushed him higher. But I think back end wide receiver 2, mid wide receiver 3 in 10-team leagues, I think is a pretty fair ranking. I do think he's going to be a starter. This is just more of a heat check here for me on Worthy. I don't want to get overly excited out of my skis before we see what he looks like after, his full season alongside Hollywood and Rice, because there's a lot of mouths to feed and not a lot of targets to go around. So if he's only going to be getting 5 targets and they're all going to be down the field, that's going to be Deshaun Jackson-esque. And, Deshaun Jackson was great some weeks, but not so great other weeks, and that's more of why I kind of knocked him down a couple spots. Brandon Aiyuk moved down 10 spots from 29 to 39. This is really unfortunate. I have him in a dynasty league where I was really hoping that he was going to be closer ready, but he's not. So that's unfortunate. That's just too bad. He's on PUP. Most of the reports have indicated that he's likely to start the season on PUP, which is going to be out 4 games. And I talked about it in the lessons learned from 2024. We don't want to see Brandon you don't want to see players that were injured last year that are not right, especially that aren't right early in the year, especially that aren't like these superstar players, right? Some people maybe would argue that Aiyuk's a superstar player, but not for fantasy. So, anyways, it's just It's just a bummer. I don't think he's going to be ready. I just am not sure what's even happening with the San Francisco wide receiver room. Jennings is wanting a new contract and kind of holding out. Pearsall is on pup with a hamstring injury, but he's expected back soon. So, Aiyuk is just somebody that unfortunately I don't think you can draft as a starter. So I ranked him as such, right? First or second guy on your bench, basically. And you can move him into your IR slots, assuming your commissioners let you put pup into IR, which they should if they don't. It opens up a roster spot at least for those first 4 weeks. You can speculate on somebody, but unfortunately, he's not somebody I'm pursuing aggressively anymore. And then Chris Godwin, I mentioned him with Egbuka, right? Ankle injury. Same thing as Aiyuk coming off an injury where he's on pup to start camp, and that's a little bit unfortunate, right? And Godwin's injury I have a little bit more confidence in, but it's tough to come back from a fibula fracture with any sort of explosion. I've harped on it any chance I get with Isiah Pacheco and with Tony Pollard. It just, we haven't seen it from Pacheco yet. Tony Pollard took forever to get back and look right in terms of explosion. And so Godwin's going to be dealing with a little bit more of that too. Now at receiver, when, it's a little bit lower impact of a position, maybe he's able to come back a little quicker, but, break the fibula, all of the tendons and ligaments in there are also injured, and it's just a long road ahead of him, basically. He did get hurt in the middle of the season. So if it does take him 10 to 12 months to get full explosion back, we might not see it until week 10, and that concerns me a lot. All right, going down to the tight end position now. So got 4 guys here, 2 risers, 2 fallers. My risers are Evan Engram. I moved him up from 11 to 7. And that's, just reading the room. Sean Payton, tight end, signed with the Broncos, is going to probably be the number 2 option. I was holding back a little bit before the draft and, didn't really address the tight end position too much in June, but, I had him ranked even lower than 11, then moved him up again, as they just don't have a clear second option. And I think it's going to be Engram. So any tight end that's going to be the number 2 target earner on their team, I think just has the ability to get to a volume point that's really hard for other tight ends to match. Similar situation too with Jonnu Smith, right? So I moved him from 16 up to 10, and I probably had him too low at 16 when he was on Miami. But I was kind of being indignant towards the fact that I couldn't get over that Waddle wasn't going to get used more. Achane was going to have a similar role, and they were going to kind of open the offense back up in a way they weren't in the second half of last year. But then now he goes to Pittsburgh, and who's Pittsburgh's second pass catcher? Yeah, exactly. It's going to be Jonnu, right? And it's like, we'll see if that changes. I don't know. Maybe Elijah Moore emerges or something, but I think it's going to be Jonnu. And so similarly to Engram, it's hard to keep somebody who's going to be the number 2 target earner on their team out of the top 10 at the tight end position. Going over to my followers, Mark Andrews is the biggest one for sure. I moved him down from 8 to 13. I just can't shake the early part of the year. I know he salvaged his season and was solid and scored a bunch of touchdowns. But there were still times later in the year he was showing up on some of my waiver wires, and it wasn't like I was running out to grab him. And so I'm just afraid I'm going to feel more of the same with that. If he gets off to a slow start, I'm going to absolutely have regretted drafting him. And he's got Likely there, who they're still hyping as like this Pro Bowl possible player, which that, I don't know. I don't think that's going to happen this year because Andrews is still there. But he's not somebody I'm super interested in pursuing at tight end in my 10-team leagues. And even in my 12-team leagues, I'm probably not going to go after him. So that was the predominant reason behind pushing him to 13. And then the last guy I'm going to talk about here is not somebody I want to be talking about, but it's Tyler Warren. I moved him down from 6 to 8. And again, I think it's a little bit of just the pouring of cold water on an aggressive ranking early in the offseason. If it's going to be Richardson, it's just really hard to trust any of the pass catchers, right? And so I'm still going to rank him pretty aggressively at 8. I still definitely would love to get him on my team because I just think he's going to open up easy throws for Richardson, but Richardson's so inaccurate. It's just like, man, would we really rather have Daniel Jones out there? I mean, I guess for Warren's sake, but I think it's ultimately going to be Richardson. And So unless the short area passing kind of improves, I just am I'm a touch worried, And so moving him back to the back end of the starters makes it so if somebody drafts him aggressively, okay, fine, I missed on him, but it is somebody still that I would pursue harder than a few of the other tight ends, right, in that 8 to 12 range. And, including Jonnu, right? I would definitely rather have Warren than Jonnu going into the year. I did move Engram over Warren, though. That was one of the big ones, big changes that I made. So I will be looking for Engram. And that all kind of makes the position really hard to draft, too, because I have, Engram, Warren, and Smith all at 7, 8, 10. And so, it's like those guys aren't even ranked in the top 10 by a lot of platforms or a lot of experts. And so it's like, okay, well, am I just going to be waiting all the way until the end of my 10-team leagues because I feel like I can get one of those three? Probably. That's probably going to be my strategy at the position. So, maybe in round 11 or 12, if Engram is still there, I can pull the trigger at that point. But at tight end, if I miss on McBride, say, because I don't expect to go in on Bowers. I don't expect to use a top 2 round pick on a tight end. Even a third, I would kind of hesitate. But, McBride end of third, early fourth starts to become part of the equation. Okay, I might go that direction. But other than that, I'm definitely looking to wait at the position and get one of these guys. All right. Thank you guys so much for watching. I know this was a long one. Hopefully this helped, discuss a bunch of players in a short amount of time, guys that I feel better about and worse about than a month ago. And if you're still with us, please hit that like button. Please hit the subscribe button. We really appreciate the support, and we look forward to talking to you in the next one. See ya.